Andy, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
No, honestly, it's an honor to have you on. I'm really, really excited to discuss not just the book. We're going to go into obviously the writing process for that, but really just who Chick Cocky Knight is. Reading through it, I mean, it's crazy to think that there are probably so many stories, especially from that time, that are just going to be lost in the annals of time, because unfortunately there isn't people like yourself that can go through research and then write about it. So, I mean, who exactly is Chick Cocky Knight?
Well, Chick was my great uncle on my dad's side. He was my nan's brother. Grew up in Hammersmith, born there in 1903. And he had quite a big family. There was about 9 kids in the family in West London. Bit of a sort of turbulent childhood towards the end of his youth. Ended up leaving home. His mother sadly passed away, and his dad took up with somebody else. So him and his brother sort of left home and lived rough for a bit. And then one of his sisters took him to one side and sort of said, you got to get yourself sorted out. And they lied about his age for him and got him into the army. And he went into the 1st Battalion Suffolk Regiment. And he would have gone in there roughly around it was after the end of the First World War, so the tail end of 1918. And as you've probably seen in the book, there's a picture of him in his army uniform, which looks about 3 sizes too big for him. He's obviously, slight in build at that time. And then what sort of transpired and unfolded from talking with my cousin Iris, who's Chick's daughter. The family archive of pictures came out, and just all these wonderful pictures from his time in the services, and you literally got a picture of his sporting prowess and his build developing, him becoming more muscular, becoming a champion at wrestling, at boxing, and surprisingly at fencing as well. And the regiment that he was in becoming champions, and you literally see Chick sort of developing, before your very eyes. As the more sort of pictures come out, it was hard to limit the book to just 28 pages of images. There were so many, but I felt it was important to get the ones with the trophies and the time when the regiment that he was in were doing so well. So you sort of got a picture of him, and obviously the 2 important ones were the wrestling and the boxing, and obviously he sort of took that with him after he'd left the regiment. But during his time in the regiment, they served out in Gibraltar and sort of service out in India as well. So we had the life-saving rescue in Gibraltar, and the first incident in Catalan Bay in Gibraltar in 1924, where he goes out and swims out 300 meters and pulls a fellow soldier back into shore and performs CPR on him. Definitely brings him back to life, and he's then rewarded. He gets a certificate from the Royal Humane Society, which gets presented to him by the governor of Gibraltar. And we've got the piece in the book where he's mentioned in the regimental newspaper and everything as well. And then what sort of transpired from researching that soldier that Chick had rescued, because you always sort of think, well, okay, he'd saved somebody's life. Now what happens to that person,
Exactly. Yeah.
And that guy went on to have a fantastic career in the services afterwards, and was a war hero, which is fantastic. Speaking to his 92-year-old son, I think it was, who never knew anything about that incident at all, was again, as you were saying earlier, you know, part of the writing process and researching Chick. It was wonderful to speak to people not only that knew him, sort of as a friend and as a colleague, you know, in the ring, but as someone who'd saved their relative's life, you know, and they were obviously humble, and I was as well, and it became very emotional, you know, because you're talking to somebody who, but for Chick, would not have been there. So yeah, and he, like I say, he takes the wrestling and the boxing with him as he leaves the services, and initially he starts up boxing, becomes quite a successful sort of amateur boxer. And then for whatever reason, so that's around 1927 when he leaves the services, and we've got these instances of him then doing the local sort of boxing circuit in Hammersmith and Fulham. And then 1932, bang, he sort of pops up the first record of him fighting, but not under the name of Chick, and that's what also made it interesting, but slightly more complicated as well, because
yes,
you know, he's fighting as the Russian Bear, Sergei Orlov, and it's only again from pictures that I had from my dad, and marrying those up with the ones that Iris had, we then got the record of, okay, so Chick is Sergei Orlov, the Russian Bear. So wherever he's going to pop up on any records, that's Chick. Because there was another Russian Bear, but fighting obviously around that time, I think. But Chick is the guy, you know, Sergei Orlov, that's him. And then we had the wonderful pictures of him, you know, all over the place in India with a 15-foot cardboard cutout of him, you know, just fantastic. But yeah, so he kicks off his professional wrestling career 1932, and then that runs forward. So we're very much at the forefront of wrestling developing as a sport, you know, and before obviously all the rules and regulations start coming in to make it more of a professional sport rather than sort of the all-in bustling sport that it was at the time. Chick's there. He's there at that 1932 as it goes forward, 1937 when all the Lord Mount Evans and the changes come through, you know. Chick's there. He's very much a pinnacle of that development of the sport, which is
seems like a
wonderful.
pivotal role. Yeah, and I think
Definitely.
The thing which really surprises me with things like that is because, especially with British wrestling, and you look at that, you kind of think of World of Sport, like you say, you know, we're looking sort of between 65 and 85, the run. You know, you've got the names of Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks. Your mum and dads have all said about them. Your grandparents have said about them. It was the boom for the British wrestling period.
Yeah.
But again, it starts somewhere before that. And it's that area of history that doesn't oftentimes get a lot of recognition. And I can imagine that the research process is really difficult with things like that, because again, you don't have social media. You haven't got, you know, the record keeping is as good as probably whoever was keeping them at that time. You know, from just a wrestling standpoint alone, it's fascinating to see just how much of a centerpiece Chick was in terms of building upon that to eventually then what it become, well, even now today. But again, that boom period between 65 and 85 is remarkable. But you said, because I really do want to touch on, because what I find most fascinating about writing books or people that are writing books, especially biographical things, everybody says, Andy, they say, it's the worst thing I've ever done. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know why I started it, but and that's for people that are doing autobiographies. You know, that's writing about yourself. When you're writing about somebody, like you said, you've learned a lot along the way and through this journey of writing the book. But in comparison to what you knew of Chick before even beginning the process, and conceptualizing the actual book itself, how much did you know about Chick then as opposed to what you know now? Because I would imagine it's a vast difference.
Yeah, certainly. It's been a massive learning curve. And what was interesting, fantastic, and wonderful, all encompassing to actually learn about from my family history was obviously the family tree sort of element, where we came from. We come from Essex and all the connections with that, and the help that I got from various people who are acknowledged in the book. But also, there were little rumours. You have, in each family, you have somebody who's obviously a larger than life character, which Chick was. So you have all these little stories that were associated with that person. And we knew the Gibraltar life-saving rescue. And so I wanted to get what information I could with regards to what happened there and who was involved. And so, speaking to the Royal Humane Society, the archivist there dug the records out and found that. And then he goes, Andy, he says, Chick's full name, Arthur Richard George Knight. He said, I've got another incident here 6 years later, which is the Hammersmith double rescue. He said, it all matches up. He said, it's definitely Chick. Now, all we had as a family was a rumour that at one point Chick had gone into the river in the Thames. And somebody had said, oh, he saved somebody. Chick's own daughter Iris said, oh, I bet you he jumped in because he was a bit drunk coming back from the pub or whatever and wanted to avoid getting arrested by the police. So even she didn't know about this. And then when it all evolved and unravelled, all the bits and pieces of the jigsaw were slowly getting put into place. All the record came out with regards to that. There was nothing in the local papers, bizarrely, with regards to that incident. Hence the campaign to getting recognition with the council with that. So the only references I was finding was the little bit in the obituary that was in the West London Gazette, where they do actually mention it. And then there was other sort of references that were made in maybe some of the fight promotion or whatever. You know, it was a lifesaver and this kind of thing. So to be able to get verification of that incident, and then you get the hard task of, okay, we then, as we did with the Gibraltar incident, try and find out what happened to those people. And we'd gone so far down the writing process. We was on the very final proofread. And again, you know, as you alluded to just now, you know, the whole writing process, there has to be a point where you go, okay, enough is enough. You know, I don't think we can go any further. And I had to do that with the wrestling fight history, because I'd got close to 1,000, and even the historians that were checking what records they had, where Chick is mentioned, were saying, Andy, you've done an excellent job. I think you've cracked it, sort of thing. So we was on the final proofread, and a good friend of mine, Martin Knight, who's done the back cover acknowledgement for me, he owned his own press cutting agency, and he was doing a proofread for me as well. And he said, Andy, he said, I think because I tried my hardest through what access to records that I had to try and trace Dorothy Folger, the young girl that Chick had rescued. Nothing was coming up whatsoever. Martin came on and said, I think I've found Dorothy. He said, I think I've got a record of a marriage in Hammersmith, and I'm pretty sure it's her. That sort of, it all sort of tallies up. Go back in, speak to my guy who's been doing the ancestry, helping me with the ancestry stuff. He tracks Dorothy and subsequent children that she has. And from that, we get addresses. And from that, drop them a line on the off chance that they are still at those addresses, because we're going through census records, etc. You know, suddenly get a phone call. Hi, you don't know me, but I've just received your letter, and I'm Dorothy's son. And that was like, well, getting a bit emotional now, but that was just fantastic. And he just went, we knew about it. He said, my mum had mentioned it, that she'd been rescued in the Thames in 1930. She didn't know who had done it, who'd saved her. But it transpired that she had, from that day sort of forward, a fear of going anywhere near or in the water at all. And he said, Andy, we never knew like the full extent of what had happened. She never detailed it. She never talked about it. And he said, you know, we are, him and his two other siblings, he said, we are here because of your great uncle Chick, which again is, you know, amazing. But to have had, that was obviously, that then led to that sort of chapter being hastily rewritten before we went to press, because obviously that had to be included. But it was tremendous to be able to say we found what happened to Dorothy, you know, and what she went on to you know, have a family, you know, and again, so you have a marriage, you have 3 siblings, and that's all, you know, from Chick going in, rescuing her, pulling her out, and then going back in to pick up the guy that had initially gone in to rescue her. Sadly, we weren't able to find him or his relatives, but to find what happened to Dorothy was just incredible. So
it is amazing. I think, I mean, you you telling the story, Andy, it seems overwhelming. Just hearing that, I think when you know, it's that stroke of good luck to have that call come through. But I did want to ask, because obviously with having those sort of conversations, I mean, I can only really imagine just how emotional that is, because as you said, it sounds sometimes it's one of those things, oh, well, you know, we didn't really know much about it. We knew this happened and this happened. Yeah. But, you know, the gravity of the situation is, like you said, these people are here because of Chick's actions. And the amazing campaign that you've been really, really pushing for, to have the plaque at Hammersmith, where he saved obviously the lives of 2 people from drowning in the Thames there. That's obviously going really well. I know we'll touch on that in a bit, but I think in terms of when you're speaking to these people and you're having that conversation, what I mean, the writing process aside, Andy, what's that like? I mean, what's it like to have that conversation? You're doing this research, you're speaking to these people, and they're expressing their gratitude. What is that feeling like when you're speaking to somebody like this in that regard?
It was just incredible, because all sorts of things go through your head, because you think we have to meet up at some stage, you know, with these people, and we sort of touched on that, and we're definitely going to get together. And then you sort of think, well, again, you know, but for Chick, I wouldn't be having this conversation with that person, and whatever they've done in their life prior to us having that conversation, again, has been for the fact that they're on this planet thanks to Chick. You know? And it was incredibly emotional. It was that conversation was more emotional than the one with the soldier's relative, just because obviously he didn't know anything about the incident at all. The family of Dorothy had obviously the knowledge of the incident, so they knew, it definitely happened, and were able to give their thoughts on it, and share with me what feelings they had about it, and obviously what their mother had what little information their mother had shared at the time. But yeah, it is. I mean, I'm having worked as a journalist for many years and spoken to many people over the time. I can honestly say, hand on the heart, I had never had a conversation like that with somebody before. But yeah, it was, I suppose, because you've gone through all the process of actually proving that incident happened, in terms of it initially being a rumour that it may or may not have happened and whatever went on. So you add the gravitas to that. You then get the record come out that from the original files, which details the incident. So that sort of rubber stamps that bit. And then you go on the research trail to dig around and try as hard as you can to find out what happened to these people. So then we'd sort of thought, I think we've gone as far as we can with it. We're probably not going to find out, sadly, what happened to them. And then right at the very crux of it, on that final proof, I'll be eternally grateful to Martin for having access to those files to throw that up. And just then it snowballed, because again, it's like the stepping stone sort of process, I suppose. We had all these little snippets of information, little nuggets along the way with regards to Chick and what he did, and with each sort of section, with each chapter, the nuggets sort of grew, and they sort of evolved into a much larger chunk of his life. So each piece just evolved, which was brilliant, because with the age that Chick, or the era that Chick was fighting in, so the 1932 to 58, when you initially went on, when I very first off sort of decided, okay, Chick's going to be the next book sort of thing, the records were throwing up only around somewhere between 30 or 40 odd fights. And you sort of think, well, in 26 years, he's got to have fought a darn sight more than that. And then you look at the names that are around there, particularly obviously the likes of one gentleman who pops up numerous times in the book is Bert Azarati. And you can go, even now, you can go onto the website that's been set up for him. There's no mention of Chick, none at all. And that's quite sad. And that was quite sad with regards to the wrestling stuff that was out there for the period that we're talking about and that we concentrate on in the book. And that came out at the end when the book had been published, because people had very kindly said, Andy, you've done Chick justice, because there's never been anything about him before. And I hope that sort of corrected that element of wrestling history, to say he was there, this guy fought Bert Azarati and others, your Douglas Clarks and whoever, countless times. You mentioned these big name guys, and some of these guys that went on to obviously become champions and whatever.
Sure.
And Chick's there. He's battling away at them. All right, he might not win, or draw or whatever, quite often being disqualified for his tactics along the way. But he's in there, and he's going up in weight as you go through the years. So he goes from sort of 16, I think 16 stone initially when he starts, right up to 18 to 20 when he finishes. So yeah, you know, and he's one of the first British wrestlers on TV, 1938. When for whatever reason they obviously start throwing out sport on television. Obviously, BBC is a new sort of product for the media there, so they want to start flagging things up. And you have the Canadian champion Earl McGreedy come over and Chick fights him at Earl's Court. And then later that year, you've then got this bizarre contest where Chick takes on former heavyweight champion Billy Wells, who comes out of retirement initially or supposedly to make a comeback. And you have one of the first televised boxer v wrestler contests, which, all right, might only last 2 minutes 30 seconds, I think it was. But Chick's claim in that was he put Billy Wells down. You know, his trademark move, his trademark wrestling punch, if you like, was the Haymaker. And a Haymaker hits Billy Wells and wins him and puts him down on one knee. So Chick had said, "Oh, I won that," you know, and he gets disqualified for a low punch. Yet it's actually a move that theoretically he should have been allowed to use, you know, because Billy Wells is boxing with his gloves on, you know,
right?
And he hits in that first few seconds of footage that you've got on Pathé News, depending which ones that you start to watch, you can see Chick taking several head punches from Billy Wells, and even at the age that he was at the time, he's still going to back a bit of a wallop. And Chick's up there and basically going for Wells all of the time throughout this thing. So yeah, again, obviously that's a shame that that never went Chick's way. But again, you know, when you have the likes of Conor McGregor and Muhammad Ali before him doing boxer v wrestler contests, Chick is one of the first. You know,
that's what's surprising, because you do find that those, especially the Ali one with Antonio Inoki, that's probably gets the most amount of acclaim, I suppose, for being one of the most famous or infamous, depending on your take of it. But I think that is a byproduct of the time, though. Do you think with Chick? I think that sort of period of history, like I said, if it wasn't for you going through the effort of piecing together the incredible story, and you as you read through the book, and hopefully as everybody watching and listening will do, when you go out and get the book and you go through it, you'll see this yourselves. But you can feel the book taking on its life of its own, and you discovering these things as you're reading through the book. It becomes more and more interesting as you're going through it. You just think, how much more has this guy done? It feels like it's just, there's so much, and it's really daunting to think that couldn't, if you hadn't have written this book, could have been lost forever.
Sure. Yeah.
But Andy, to touch on the sort of fight history that you've put together in the book, and I know you said you've received some praise, and Andy, rightfully so, is so difficult, even in today's standards, for people to keep track of sort of every match they've had or every fight that they've had, and to go back from a career, like you said, that was starting in the very early 1930s, and to piece together the pages upon pages of what you've got in there with the detail that's there is honestly, it's remarkable. And it's a really, really fascinating read. It's a really fascinating read. The boxer and wrestler thing.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he has dabbled, as he said, he dabbles in amateur boxing. And a lot of this is picked up through his time that you said. So when he's joined the armed forces, he's picked up a lot, particularly there's a lot of this that goes on in India. Is that right?
Yeah.
So in terms of his time in India, when you're sort of researching that element and this career through the armed forces, aside from the Gibraltar, obviously the amazing life-saving feat there, you're looking at the time spent picking up the boxing career, and he's gone from this, like you said, he's been homeless at one point. He signed up underage, lied about his age, got in, and he's just built this entire career and life for himself.
Mm.
In terms of him getting into the boxing, when you was researching that side of things, how did that compare with the wrestling side? Did you find that it was easier to go through with the boxing fights, or was it a bit more challenging? Because I think boxing probably gets a lot more coverage than wrestling did at that time, but still much harder to go through, especially when it's things like fights in India and within, the army essentially. Then at this point in time, was that any easier at all, or?
Well, it was made incredibly easier, and the only thing to make me to make me think that Chick might have dabbled further in boxing was literally going on a hunch, because what happened was there was some bits and pieces coming out in the wrestling promotional bits that come out. So the stuff that goes onto the posters, obviously they try and vary it, and then the little snippets that you get in the newspapers. So pre the fight and post the fight, they tend to sort of reference things about the fighters in there. So Chick sort of gets reference with champion in the Indian Army, that kind of thing. And it came out that there was a mention of champion boxer, and I thought, well, I found this poster of him coming back out of the army, so around sort of late 1920s, sorry, when he's in Fulham in a charity bout. And I thought, okay, hold on a minute, maybe he, I don't know, for whatever reason, might have looked to get the gloves back on at some stage. Roll forward, I'm watching a documentary about the late, great Freddie Mills, and a gentleman pops up there, Miles Templeton, who writes for Boxing News, and he's a boxing historian, and he's got his own website. So I get in touch with Miles, again, going on a hunch, thinking, I've got this poster of Chick, saying that he did a boxing match, etc. But I'm doing the book. I want to find out if Chick might have gone pro at any stage. Sure, no problem, Andy. Obviously, sorted out some research bits and pieces. He said, I'll go through my records for you. So it turns out in 1935 to 1936, and again, for whatever reason, unbeknown to us and the family, Chick turns pro boxer for a year. So in between, whilst the wrestling career is going on, he turns pro boxer. Has about 7 fights in total, one of which was against the former champion Reggie Mean. I think that's his last fight, actually. So again, that was something we never knew anything about, the family never knew anything about. And there was a reference in one of the write-ups or something that Miles had found, where he said, I think we got something with regards to Chick and the police. And there's always been, again, referencing the family, there's always been this close association between Chick and the local police for whatever reason. Maybe he knew somebody or whatever. But I got in touch with their people that were responsible for sport and for boxing in particular. Two guys that do all their bits and pieces. And so Chick was the police H division champion, and that competition is still running to this day. And so when I spoke to them, they said to me, well, Chick must have been a heck of a boxer at that time, because they said now the championship is held, the finals are held at the O2, I think it is, and crowds between sort of 2,000 to 3,000 will turn up for it. But each division has its own representative, and they go up against each other. The H division, I think, was Whitechapel, which is where the Jack the Ripper, where the police were responsible for that investigation, were based out of. So again, sort of, I'll ask yourself, well, why was Chick fighting with that sort of thing? I don't know, but anyway. So it's quite a hard contest to win, apparently. All the divisions put up, as I said, their representatives. So Chick would have had to go on through quite a process to get to the final of that, and then obviously to win it, which again is a fantastic achievement.
Yeah, it's definitely a feat in itself.
And so he was quite significant in his prowess at that sport, as well as the wrestling side. So he when they say a haymaker, it must have packed a hell of a.
It must have. Well, I mean, if it's rocked the boxing world as well as the wrestling, then there's no doubt about it. I think it's odd, isn't it? Really, because like you said, there's certain points where it's gone from, essentially, taxis to army. There's wrestling, there's boxing, there's films.
Yes.
It's just he's jumped from all these things. I mean, you get this idea and this picture of Chick, particularly when you're reading. You just get this idea that it's sort of he's done this, he's conquered it, he's going to move to the next thing, and with, I mean, obviously a physical specimen, like you said, you can see throughout the photos, and he becomes pretty much a mountain of a man, which makes again I think the swimming strengths of him, obviously, which he then later on becomes a lifeguard, makes it all the more incredible, really, to see this, like I say, a mountain of a man, I think, coming towards you. I would have thought if it was me, I would feel very safe, Andy, to be honest, if I saw it. But the jumps around and things, because I do want to touch on the films, because looking through, so he's appeared in Night in the City.
Well,
or at least he was an advisor for the.
He was involved with Mickey Woods, and when Iris went through the contacts book, Mickey Woods' name came up, which fitted, because we knew that Chick was a stuntman. We knew he'd been in a couple of films. The Wicked Lady was one where he was doing stunts for. He was closely tied in with Riverside Studios in terms of the proximity where he lived, and I think he'd done security work for them as well, but then sort of fallen into doing the extra work, and then obviously got involved in the stunts.
Incredible.
And Mickey Woods had his own, I think he had a crew of around 200 to 300 stuntmen on his books, and a lot of them, Mickey Woods was a wrestler and ex-wrestler himself. So a lot of his crew were ex-wrestlers, which made sense because obviously they know how to fall properly. Yeah. And so, Chick gets involved certainly in the film side, and that was really, really difficult. And again, a lot of the time we had to go on hunches and sort of sit through hours, or I had to sit through hours of black and white films trying to spot this hulk of a man, and pausing something and rewinding it back, and is that Chick? I'm pretty sure that is. You had the connections obviously with the likes of Flanagan and Allen, who popped up on adjoining bills where Chick was fighting. So I, again, going on a hunch, was he connected with them in any way? Yes, he appeared in one of the films with them. And then you had there's the tremendous picture, which is with backstage with Joseph Locke and Ben Morris, and they're all sort of shaking hands on Brian Forbes as well. And so Chick is very much a celebrity And obviously these people know him. There's no other reason why Joseph Locke would have come backstage afterwards to meet Chick, other than meet, a celebrity of the time of the ring sort of thing.
Yeah, of course.
So getting back to the film, unfortunately, a lot of the studios don't keep records going back that far. Speaking to the guys at Ealing Studios, who've got their own sort of setup there, they didn't keep records, unfortunately. The stunt people that we were in touch with, the chairman knew of Chick, but that was as far as it went. And so again, it was just a question of trying to piece in and join the dots with the likes of what sort of set the path rolling, or set the ball rolling rather, was the Diana Dawes link, because we had the rumour that Chick had lent Diana his car for when she got married to Dennis Hamilton at Westminster, and then strangely Diana pops up in various films with wrestlers or connected with where wrestlers are involved. And again, it was sort of going, okay, is Chick involved in some way, and watching through the footage of those. So I think you got the likes of OK for Sound, going from memory, was another one. And there's probably more. It's just a question of we weren't able to, go through as many as you would like. And unfortunately, because of the extra work at the time, and the appearances, the Small and in Trouble Brewing, his only that we know about speaking part. Again, it's uncredited, so it's not listed anywhere. So
Most oftentimes is the case, I think, from films, especially around that period as well, where it's kind of peak film noir, which again, and very popular, sort of, especially post-war as well. But you've got your favourites like Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, all of those. I mean, to go through black and white films, I mean, I wouldn't personally mind it, but when you're, to watch them, that's absolutely fine. To try and pick out people in the background, I think, is a different story. But it is, so many are uncredited, and that's what I imagine it's just made your job a lot harder. I think still this is a passion project, though, more than anything, isn't it? Because you go through, you're looking through all of these different things. You have to put the work in, obviously, but you take, like what you're saying, and a lot of it seems to be built on what you're saying is just a hunch. You've got a hunch that this has happened here. So the boxing has got him famous, the wrestling he's got him famous. This has probably allowed him to open the doors up into these other ventures, predominantly then the film industry and stuntman work, which is quite surprising that more wrestlers don't end up as stuntmen, exactly for the reason that you said, to be honest, because they can take those films. But, I think a celebrity is probably one of the best words you could probably use to describe Chick, really. Yeah. And for that time, but almost, again, with nobody keeping any records, this essentially is now his new claim to fame in the 21st century, and it is through your book.
Thank you.
No, it's okay.
The brilliant one was which again came up through going through the newspaper archives, and I forget what the headline was when you go through the newspaper archives, little snippets get drawn out. So your search criteria, you have to narrow it as much as possible. This one piece popped up in the West London Gazette, and I think the story below it, what sort of threw me was it was talking about a fate, and I thought it started off 20 stone former wrestler, and then the bit below was about opening of a fate, and I thought, oh, Chick's, and because it was local, I thought, oh, well, Chick being where he was situated, I thought, oh, he's gone to open a local fate or whatever, and that was the nightclub incident from 1959, which put the stamp on the door work. And that, reading that, again, is just incredible. And then what sort of emerged, and the way I've sort of pieced it together to let the reader make up their own mind with regards to the connections with that piece and Chick's door work, is entirely up to them. But there's more than several connections there. The Nash story that comes out literally less than 3 weeks after that piece, that's sort of alluding to door work and protection work and everything that sort of goes on. And then obviously you've got Billy Hill situated less than half a mile down the road from where Chick is in Barnes as well, and then the Princess Margaret security work at Kensington Palace. And you just think, wow, and the connections there between Tony Armstrong Jones and Billy Hill. So yeah, but that story, when you read it, the seeing off the thugs, razor wielding and knife wielding thugs on the door is just.
I think that's someone like Chick probably would have encountered something like that quite often. Do you think? Because
sure.
With again, his size and stature, and especially if being a celebrity at this point in time as well, and you're going to be known for boxing, you're known for wrestling, you're working on the doors, you're working security, especially through that time. Some people are chancers, aren't they? They're going to try their luck and see how they probably fare. It might be a good story for the boys. Took down the boxing champion. I can't imagine it. They got very far with it. Probably as far as about to the floor when he threw them down. But yeah, I think with Chick, because again, I mean, I've put a lot of these, I've written a lot of things from the book in here as well to go through. But I was going to ask Andy, I think if you was to say somebody's picked up this book, obviously we've come along to it from a wrestling aspect. And again, really fascinating for anybody that's interested, especially with British wrestling. I would recommend to read this anyway, because it does cover that period of history that isn't really spoken about very much. From a boxing aspect, there's a lot in there. From anybody that maybe maybe you're not a wrestling fan or a boxing fan, and you just want to pick this up because you're interested, maybe from the local area, you want to know about essentially a local hero. What do you think when you're reading it is it, I say a message, but what do you think kind of the message would be in that? Because I've read that, Andy, and I've looked at it and gone, right, so here's somebody then who's essentially come from, not necessarily from nothing, but I mean, literally the bottom of the barrel, being homeless, to somehow all over the world, champions, becomes this, skinny kid, becomes a huge amount of a man, lifeguard, army, wrestler, boxer, film, stuntman, doorman, taxis. I mean, some people have one job for their whole lives, don't they? And then you look at something like this and it's extraordinary. You was labeling this as he's got a colourful life. And I think that really is probably the best way to put it. But is there do you think for somebody that would pick up this book, is it a motivational kind of story? Would you say it's an inspirational?
Yeah, I hope so. It certainly was to me.
Yeah.
There's a few traits in there that I recognise that I recognised in myself with Chick, and that's not surprising given the family connection.
Sure.
But I think, I would say certainly believe that nothing is impossible, really. And from, again, researching particularly the Hammersmith incident and the Gibraltar incidents and the tides and what the rivers and what Catalan Bay was like at that time. The belief he must have had in himself to go in and save those people, knowing that there was a possibility that he could drown, and obviously they could as well, but believing that it was something he had to do, obviously, and then to have done it. And there was, from speaking again with friends who knew him and remember him from being in the pub and whatever, they were things that he very rarely spoke about. You know, he was obviously very humble, and Iris says that as well. He was very much a gentle giant.
Yeah.
You know, he might be the thug in the ring or the villain in the ring, and you know, the bouncer on the door, whatever. But obviously, when he was at home, it was a completely different story.
I think that does translate very well.
Yeah, there's pictures of him in the back garden. You know, sort of peeling prawns and yeah, like I said earlier, there was far too many to be able to include, sadly. There's pictures of him helping out in the local pub back garden, obviously fitting up scaffolding for an event or whatever. There's the fantastic tale, which again has been told to me by a couple of people, so I'm going on the hunch it is true that for Adair, one Sunday morning, he gets out, he's got his trousers and his vest on, he puts a sombrero on, which apparently used to be something that was always in the living room at Castlemore, and presumably it's quite low tide, but he swims across the other side of the Thames, goes into the pub absolutely dripping wet, still with a sombrero on his head, orders a pint, and obviously picks up the bet that it was to do it, and goes back home. You know, just like, incredible.
That's brilliant. I love stories like that, but I particularly just love the stories in general in the book. And like I say, and I think a message that I took away from it, especially through the last 12 months that we've all been having, it's been an incredibly tough time for a lot of different people, obviously, you know, with everything going on. But, you know, it's a really pleasant read. Just to, again, I think from what you said, you really, really can, like, you have to bet on yourself. And it certainly seems that Chick just knew his worth, took a chance on himself, and I think more than anything, he wasn't afraid to take the leap in any situation. Like you said, you know, with going to save people's lives. I mean, that's not something you stand and sort of debate, is it? I mean, you straight in.
Yeah.
But you know, he's not afraid to take any bets on himself, and I really think that's an important message that I think people probably need now more than ever. You know, I think you really, really do need to take a chance on yourself and believe in yourself. And really, anything is possible. You can honestly come out for any situation, regardless of the hand that you've been dealt, and, you know, make something of yourself. And this is a trend, really, Andy, through your family. I was going to touch on really quickly. It's not your first book, of course.
No. Yeah.
But your family, I mean, it's just a really incredible story. I need to read your first book, but it's after reading this, because it is just incredible. And it's your family just seems to be, Andy, I think you get the American dream. I don't think we don't have the British dream, do we? But I think if we did, I think that your family would personify that, Andy, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
No, it's inspirational.
Thank you very much. We've got the American relatives itching to see us in September, so they're going to be, fingers crossed, all carries on going as it is. In September, we're going to be out in New York to hook up with the stateside side of the Knight family, who've got their copies of the book and have loved reading about Chick as much as I loved writing about him. And Tuesday we've got the Haymaker Cocktail launching, which is going to be.
I was going to come to it, Andy.
Like its name. Having tasted it a week or so ago, it packs a wallop. It really does.
I think with the ease of the lockdowns coming up, obviously by the time everybody's hearing this and seeing this, of course, we should be having some ease to the lockdown. What better way to celebrate being able to go out there than, I suppose, having a drink that you probably caused you to forget the night. No, in all honesty, though, I think that, again, that's really, really, really cool. Where can people get the Haymaker? Because obviously I will need to be coming down to London at some point, and I will need to find where I can taste this beverage, Andy. So where would I find the Haymaker?
Well, so Sam's Riverside Restaurant and Bar is on the Thames side, on the Hammersmith Thames side of the river. It's literally next door but one to Riverside Studios, funnily enough. So if you're on the river and outside having a Haymaker, you're looking at Hammersmith Bridge, the scene of the incident, which the cocktail is sort of in tribute to.
That's brilliant.
And so the larder store at the rear of the restaurant is actually stocking and selling the book. It's available in Barnes Bookshop on the other side of the river where Chick used to live. So, and they're selling very well in there as well. So those are the two outlets in London. It's available in the Loughton bookstore out by me in Essex, the Back Page Sports Bookshop in Newcastle from the Northeast Connection, and on eBay. I'm hoping Amazon will click in at some point. But
I was going to say, I saw that all sold out, and I was going to have to say to everybody, if you want this book, you need to get on it pretty quick because it is selling.
It is. We're at 170 copies since mid-Jan launch, and over 20 of them have gone to the States. Not all family, but so that's been brilliant. And the response and the reviews. I mean, we've been in Boxing News when Alex Daly did the piece about the boxery rest of the contest with Billy Wells that we talked to. We've had tremendous coverage, which has been great. The feedback has been brilliant. Guys like yourselves doing the podcasts, I've done countless ones of these now, and every time they're fantastic to do. And it's just another way of getting coverage about the book and getting more people knowing about Cheek, and the more the better, you know.
Absolutely,
for me,
especially with the stories that are in there. That's what makes doing these kind of things really pleasant and worthwhile, because too often you see today anyway, especially with people with platforms, it can be unfortunately sometimes used in a very negative manner, and it's really really refreshing to be able to go through and speak to somebody, and it's just nothing but good and motivational stuff, Andy. Now, I do want to just touch on, we mentioned about the plaque, because obviously now everyone knows where to go for your Haymakers. We'll put the link down below. If Andy, I'm sure we'll be all right to do that, but I'll pop some links down everywhere you can get, obviously the book, and where you can have a nice beverage from Monday when you can go out. Well, you can sit indoors, sit outdoors, take it home, I suppose, whichever you want to do. But yeah, the plaque. So we started that then. You started the petition. You wanted the plaque on the Hammersmith Bridge to obviously commemorate and give recognition to the fact that this incredible life-saving feat. And that was, last time I checked, was at 400 and I think maybe 48.
Yeah, I think we're around something like that. We're around the 450 mark. Yeah,
which is amazing.
We've gone through. We're on a since it launched. It's been going 2 years now. The campaign, the petition sort of launched last year, I think it was. But we've gone through 2 mayors of Hammersmith and Fulham to get this far. This last mayor, the current mayor, Councillor Murphy, has been fantastic in terms of dialogue and engagement. So please God, he sticks by his promise to put this plaque on. And where it will be, obviously, because now sadly the bridge is currently closed to all and sundry. They're talking about a bench situated very close to the bridge, and from dropping into Sam's Riverside Restaurant, I found there's a group of 3, funnily enough, just literally a stone's throw from the restaurant, and you're very close to the bridge. where it would sit perfectly. So hopefully that will be done there. Again, we've just got to decide. Obviously, the wording, they've got to give the rubber stamp to the date and finalise that, etc. But it's all been given the green light. So it went through like a due diligence process that they had to do with this. And the next thing is that there's been gentle pressure from when I commenced this process with writing the book on Gibraltar, to hopefully do the same. Chick was up for 2 consecutive life-saving awards in the Mayor's Awards, but sadly was overlooked. And Gibraltar Heritage have now said that they're looking into recognition for him. And given the comments I've had with regards to Catalan Bay and how treacherous that water is, hopefully that will be recognised, because as far as I know, Chick is the only person to have saved somebody in that bay throughout the years. So and I know there's a good deal of support on the Gibraltar side for it to happen as well. So yeah, hopefully that will be the rubber stamp on it to get those 2 pieces of recognition done, and that will.
No,
that will definitely do justice.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the justice has been served in your book, Andy, and I think all the effort that it goes through, I can only really imagine, to be honest. It's probably quite a hard-fought battle sometimes to try and have these things go through, and to get the green light, to have that on a bench. It sounds as though it has almost sort of fallen together quite well, because it's all situated around that same area.
Yeah,
it just feels like the universe wanted you to make this book, Andy. I think it wanted you to get this done, and I'm really pleased that you have. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I think in closing, Andy, because I'm just conscious of your time, and I'm really grateful for the amount of time you spent with me today. I think in terms of sending people home with a clear message, obviously we're going to say where you can get your book, and people will be getting this book. Andy, what is next for this? Because we had a little tiny Twitter interaction, and we were nudging Netflix. Are we saying? I mean, what are we saying? Are we saying that we're going to get this over? How far do you think this can go? Because I don't think there's ever going to be enough coverage for people that do the work like Chick's done. And when it comes to saving people's lives, like we said, we've gone through, and you've gone through some really amazing things. How far can you go?
Well, I had the feeling, and the more I went into the writing process with the book, and the further it got down the line, and the things that were coming out, it just dawned on me. I thought, I think there's a film here, and having seen some of the films that have been out there, like The Wrestler, a couple of other films about boxers and whatever that have involved their life story as well. I sort of thought, well, maybe a documentary, I don't know. But funny enough, a documentary maker did get in touch, and as far as I know, he said he passed it on to a film guy, a filmmaker, a friend of his, because from the documentary aspect, obviously, sadly, there's not enough footage of Chick around to be able to do that justice, which I fully understand, and
of course,
that's fine. But I think a film, most definitely. In this past week, one has got in touch, connected with wrestling. Whether he'll get back in touch, I don't know. But so, yeah. Ray Winston has got a copy.
I was going to say who would play him.
Well, that was my idea, that sort of, if I could get it into the hands of people that I thought could possibly look at it and think, maybe there's something here. The one guy who I would dearly love to have a copy of it, and given the local connection in the fact that he was born and raised in Mortlake, which is literally bang smack next door to Barnes, where Chick lived, and Mortlake was where my dad was born and raised. Is Tom Hardy, and again, you look at Chick there, and you look at Tom Hardy in build and stature, and you think that could be possible. That could be possible.
That would be. I'd be very interested to see something along those lines, Andy.
Yeah.
To be honest.
So who knows? I think a question of sort of watch this space, but we'll be trying our darndest to see if we can twist some arms to somebody to do something with it. Because I think the book tells its own story, but maybe in celluloid, it could tell something different. So that would be fantastic.
That's brilliant.
First a cocktail, then the movie.
Yeah, I mean that's good. You can sip on the cocktail whilst you're watching the movie. No, that's very exciting stuff, Andy. I really do honestly wish you the best with that, and obviously in any way we can, and anyone can help with any sort of platform to spread the word. Of course, absolutely, more than happy to do so, because that is something we would love to see.
Excellent, thank you,
Andy. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.